Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Reimagine the CRM with Relationship Intelligence. In this session, we're going to look at CRM in a slightly different light as a sales enabler versus a fancy address book with benefits. We'll show you how your own corporate relationship network can enable your reps, your managers, and even your HR team. This is not a future directions pitch or just a high-level theory on what could be done, but rather some specific practices and examples via case study and even some screenshots. We want to show you some amazing things available right now to turbocharge your CRM and take your sales organization to the next level in customer experience and engagement. So to help us with that today, we have a couple of speakers. Kate Leggett, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester, and she'll be joined by TrustFair's own Senior Director of Sales, Johnny Helmberger. All non-presenting participants have been muted. If you have any questions or issues during this webinar, feel free to type them in the chat window, and there will be some time for Q&A at the end. We'd also be happy to follow up this session with any additional information needed. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email with the recording within 48 hours of our completion today. To start us off, we have Kate Leggett from Forrester, who serves application development and delivery professionals. She's a leading expert on customer relationship management and customer service strategies, maturity, benchmarking, governance, and ROI. She's an accomplished public speaker and frequently presents at industry events such as CRM Evolution. She's been published in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes magazine, and industry publications such as CRM Magazine, KM World, and Destination CRM. She has an extensive industry experience with more than 10 years of leadership at CRM and customer service software companies, where she held senior product marketing and product management roles. She's also a published author on customer service trends and best practices. With that as a backdrop, I will now hand the session over to you, Kate.
Hey, thank you, and thanks to everyone who's taken an hour out of their busy days to listen to Johnny and I speak about how to reimagine CRM with relationship intelligence. So I want to start this presentation off by talking about not about CRM. Let's take a step back from CRM and talk about the buyer and seller conversation and the importance of the buyer, the customer, in today's world, and the importance of meeting the buyer's expectations for engagement. And I am having trouble moving slides, so there we go. Okay, so to start this conversation, let's look back a decade ago, 2 decades ago. In the past, companies did a great job at controlling all the information about the products and services that they were selling. Its price, location, features, functions, how it was used to deliver business value. But today, in our world today, there's such easy access to authentic, transparent information that's available to all customers, all buyers. The balance of power has really shifted, and it's ushered in, this change in the center of power has ushered in what Forrester calls the age of the customer. And again, today at your fingertips, there's a tremendous amount of information about products and services, how products and services are rated and reviewed by other customers, how it can be used to deliver business value. So what it means today is that your buyers, your customers, are really sitting in the driver's seat, and they are controlling the conversation that they have with companies that they do business with. And what this means is that companies have to be a lot more obsessed with delivering experiences in line with your customers' expectations to garner their satisfaction, to make that sale, to keep them, to keep your customers satisfied and loyal to your brand. And this isn't only true in our B2C world, but it's increasingly true in the B2B world. And there's some examples of industries that have undergone big shifts, like insurance or financial services or healthcare, where it's really easy to see information about products and services. For example, financial services products, see ratings and reviews of insurance policies, even healthcare providers. And what this means is that a buyer can quickly get their arms around a lot of information and compare products products and services, even before contacting the company for more specific information. And for B2B sales, our data shows that customers come armed to the table with information. 63% of buyers research their purchases before picking up the phone and making that first contact with a company that they are considering to buy a purchase from. So this is why it's so important for companies to provide these experiences in line with your buyers, your customer expectations, again, to make this first sale, to help nurture that relationship that the buyer has with a company. So what it means is, let me see if I can move slides. Next slide, please. What it means is that no longer the seller is just making the sale and walking away from the customer. In today's world, that's not good enough. And can you build out the slide? Sellers have to deliver outcomes and success. And to do this, they need to understand who the customer is, what their pain points are, and being able to achieve their business goals. And they have to help educate the buyer to choose the right set of technologies or products to help them meet their business goals. But it doesn't stop there. They also need to make sure that a new customer is getting value out of their purchase, again, to meet that buyer's end goals. And this means that sellers or vendors are now responsible for managing these long-term relationships. They're not only delivering products. Okay, next slide. So to just dig a little bit deeper into this, the seller needs to make sure that the customer is onboarded properly, learns how to use the product, learns how to use the most differentiated features or capabilities out of a product, learns how to use the product to industry standards or industry best practices. And what the seller has to do, they have to nurture this relationship. They have to make sure that the customer is successful in meeting their business goals. And this means that, again, the buyer has to manage their customer through a life cycle with the product, from making that initial purchase to renewal to perhaps recognizing and pursuing expansion opportunities within an account. So, next slide. So, we've talked a lot about the importance of meeting buyers' expectations, but what are these expectations? What do buyers want to get in a sales cycle? And we use a framework of 3 E's to describe what buyers want. They expect easy, effective experiences that elicit in them a positive emotion. So what does this mean? Easy experiences. Buyers want to be able to contact a company, a salesperson over the channel, the touch point of their choice, that are increasingly trending to the digital channels, and they want to be able to get the information that they need or a question answered to be able to move that sale forward. Buyers also, they want their time to be valued. This means that every interaction, every conversation has to be relevant, has to be effective, has to provide accurate information that, again, meets a buyer's expectations. Again, so that the entire sales process can move along smoothly. And this is really important as well in a complex B2B sales where selling is done by a team and buying is done by a team. All the conversations and side conversations that are being had across the organization, you want to know about them and you want to leverage all these different conversations so that you are providing cohesive information to your buyer. Buyers don't want this one-size-fits-all type of interactions. Again, they want conversations to be targeted to their industry, to their pain point, to their role within an organization, if they're in finance or purchasing or an IT buyer or a business buyer. And they also want to understand how the products that they're considering to purchase help them meet their end goals. Next slide. So, delivering these experiences, easy, effective experiences that provide this, that elicit this positive emotion, really has a quantifiable impact on top-line revenue. So a buyer who's had a good experience during a sales cycle corresponds to will end up buying from you, will end up keeping their business with you for longer, will consider your company for additional purchases, will also serve as an advocate for your products, for your company, which also help influence future new sales. And we see this correlation between better customer experiences and increased top-line revenue in over 40 different industries that Forrester has data on. Next slide. So, again, to Forrester's tenet of the age of the customer, if your buyer, your customer, is controlling the conversation that they're having with sellers, how can companies equip sales teams with the right information about the customer to add value with each interaction? So I want to answer this question by digging in a little bit more about buyers' expectations. So next slide. So the data that I have on this slide is interesting. We find as more buyers, more and more, they're doing this research online before contacting a company, we find that the nature of conversations that buyers are having with sellers is changing. They want to talk to sales teams when their purchase is complex, or it's a highly considered purchase, or it's an expensive purchase, where they're really looking to the seller for guidance on how they can best meet their business objectives. They want to talk to sellers when their solutions require installation, or it may need service, or it may need price negotiation. And they really want sellers to help with choosing, again, the right product when they are making a highly considered purchase. Next slide. But even in these interactions, buyers want sellers to value their time. And again, this is especially true in B2B sales scenarios where, again, selling is done by a team of sellers and buying is done by a team of buyers. And they, again, want every interaction to be on point, to add value, to be targeted to their role in an organization, have different conversations if they're in procurement, or if they're in finance, or if they're business buyer, or if they're the IT buyer. Next slide. So at Forrester, what we do is we classify buyers into 4 archetypes based on the complexity of the buyer and the complexity of the product or service being sold. And again, buyers expect sellers to know who they are, to lead them most effectively through the right sales process to be able to meet their end goals. What we find is that simple selling processes, like when the products sold are really simple, they're easy to configure, those sales are being done increasingly online. But for the highly considered purchases, again, the buyer wants to be speaking with a seller. And it's important for sellers to act as solution consultants, to understand customers, their business, their needs, the industry that they're in, and help choose, again, the right solution for the buyer to meet their end goals. And then bring internal stakeholders and budget together to make that purchase. Next slide. So again, it becomes increasingly important in this world to have, again, the right conversation with the buyer at the right time. You need to understand the profile of buyers. You need to understand the role within a company. And sales teams as well need to be cognizant of the current situation of the buyer, the market forces in their particular industry or domain, particular pain points, and understand the buyer's current situation and their future needs. And what they also need are coordinated conversations. So again, that team of sellers, you've got a salesperson, a sales consultant, perhaps you've got an IT or a security or risk expert in the mix of your sales team. As these folks are interacting with the buying team, each individual on the sales side understands the conversations that have happened with folks on the buyer side. Who has had the conversation? What has been said? So again, to be able to have a coordinated conversation, have a coordinated front as they're trying to move the deal forward. So, next slide, please. What does all this have to do with CRM? Here, let's build out this slide and go to the next slide. Sorry. Okay, so what does all this have to do with CRM? So what we find at Forrester is that 2/3 of companies, both big and small, are using CRM as a foundational element, a foundational technology for customer engagement. And if you look at CRM as a software category, it's a huge category. Global CRM spending was $24 billion last year. It's projected to grow to $32 billion by next year. Next slide. So what is CRM? It's a 20-year-old technology. It started as software to support sales automation, basically to manage accounts and contacts. And then sales automation quickly grew into a list of features and functions that were needed to manage the sales process. It became a tool to help managers understand forecasts, to track deals. It became a tool to help define sales processes, to streamline the sales process from lead to revenue. So the first generation of sales automation technologies didn't empower salespeople, the frontline workers of your sales force that are in direct contact with your customers, to deliver experiences in line with buyers' expectations. They weren't armed with the right technologies to answer questions like, how do I better know my customer? What conversations should I have that will result in better outcomes? What collateral should I offer a particular customer? How much discounting should I offer? How do I make better use of my time? Next slide. So what happened today? CRM, and especially CRM for sales automation, has really matured. It covers a huge swath of capabilities that support a customer in their end-to-end journey with a company. For example, sales automation and enablement solutions help, for example, recommend the right content to be used in a sales process. CRM has, for example, CPQ solutions that help automate the configuring and pricing of products and generate proposals for buyers. You've got sales performance management technologies that help optimize territory management. And on and on. You've got this huge set of features and functions within CRM to help sales managers as well as frontline personnel be able to do their job. Next slide. And so what we find today is that modern CRM does a great job in empowering sales teams to be able to deliver those easy and effective experiences for their buyers. It allows sellers to effortlessly engage with their buyers, to streamline the sales process, to manage discounting, manage collaboration. However, modern CRM doesn't do a great job on the emotion part of the equation, connecting the customer on an emotional level, helping nurture, strengthen relationships that have an immense impact on customer experience and ultimately revenue. Next slide. So again, to repeat myself, buyers, again, want to have the right conversations at the right time, to be able to have their questions answered. They want to be able to explain their situation. They want to be able to get information about how to solve problems that they're experiencing. And to do this well, again, a seller has to understand who the buyer is, what their sphere of influence is, what their relationships are within and outside of an organization. And they also want these communications to build on one another, so that a buyer isn't having to rediscover information. And these relationships, these connections, these conversations are a company's most valuable asset, but they're really hard to surface and they're really hard to monetize. You think about, for example, in a B2B sales situation, there's a data point that says that a warm introduction has 5 times the likelihood of being able to achieve engagement with a buyer compared to a cold call. And so if you could tap into this relationship, if you could identify the right people within an organization's network who have existing relationships with a prospect or a client, and then that you can use to provide that warm introduction, you have a much better chance of making that sale. Again, because you're getting to the right person and you're connecting on that emotional level. And so what we see today is there's this new category of intelligence solutions that we call relationship intelligence that companies are using to give insights to these connections. And these solutions really complement and extend traditional CRM. And they provide sales team with this relevant real-time connection data about communication activities between them and their customers. Next slide. So how does relationship intelligence work? These solutions are monitoring in real time and collecting data about communications within your organization and outside of your organization. And that's a tremendous amount of data that you can tap into for real insights. And it's tracking, these solutions track metadata from, for example, email or chat conversations. It's not reading the content of emails, so privacy isn't compromised in any way. What it's doing, for example, is tracking like who sent the email, when it was sent, how frequently these conversations are happening between individuals, and then analytics can surface relationships and strengths of relationships, again, inside and outside of organizations. And this information is updated in real time, and algorithms are learning patterns of these relationships and then how to use these relationships to be able to strengthen connections and use these relationships during a sales cycle, and then to help manage the health of an account after you've made a sale. So next slide. How can this relationship intelligence improve CRM? And I've got a couple case studies that I'll quickly talk through before handing this over to Johnny. But for my 3 use cases are around sales targeting, customer understanding, and customer health. So sales targeting, again, we've already talked about this. Again, it's all about making connections with known employees. So again, you can look at, you can identify individuals with strongest relationships that you have to within a target account that you can contact to be able to get an introduction to a prospect, or you can talk to them and get better context of your of the account, it could be a partner relationship, and then this is added information that you're getting from these warm introductions, which isn't in your CRM, and it helps sales have more relevant contextual information, and it ultimately helps generate better sales outcomes. Relationship intelligence can also help you better understand a customer. It can help you understand the conversations that the seller has had with the buyer. When was your customer last contacted? Who contacted them? What was the context of the interaction? And it's all this extra data that you can add into a CRM so that the sales team has a better understanding of all the interactions that are going on with an account. And again, it helps them be better prepared for meetings, for calls, helps coordinate conversations, and then you're not blindsided in a meeting about a conversation that was a side conversation that was had that you didn't know anything about. And then my third use case is around customer health. It helps, you can review, you can keep tabs on your company, your client's entire messaging history, and you can see the accounts that you may be neglecting, and then you can proactively intervene with these accounts to help communicate with them, nurture them back to health, which will help you get that next renewal. So next slide, please. Just before I hand it over to Johnny, I just want to say that CRM is great at providing easy and effective relationships. You layer onto it relationship intelligence, and so CRM plus relationship intelligence really helps a sales team delivering better engagement in line with prospects, buyers, expectations. And again, why do you want to meet your buyers' expectations for engagement? Because again, you'll be more likely to make a sale, you'll be more likely to keep your customer will be more likely to buy more from you during their lifetime of engagement with you, and your customer will ultimately be more likely to serve as an advocate, which ends up driving new sales. Again, the combination helps you be more effective, helps sales teams sell faster, sell bigger, sell better. And all of this translates into higher revenue for your company. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Johnny.
Thanks for your insight, Kate, and explanation on how these pieces fit together. I would like to spend a minute introducing Johnny Helmberger from TrustSphere. For over 15 years, Johnny has been a cross-industry consulting expert in software, telecommunications, and analytics, with a proven track record of perfecting user experiences for a diverse variety of clients. Johnny has successfully guided cross-functional teams to achieve a wide range of business goals through strategic vision, effective management, and grassroots evangelism. He's particularly passionate about the charge to overcome common CRM challenges around adoption and sales rep productivity. With that, take it away, Johnny.
Thanks, Don, and thank you, Kate. Let me see if I can actually advance this myself really quick here. Did I do that, or did you do that?
You did.
Okay, good. Good sign, good sign. So while we're focusing on CRM today in a very specific way, I want to start by pointing out the value of relationship intelligence and analytics and how it applies across the enterprise. As such, TrustSphere's technology is a cross-functional platform with benefits of significant business impact in areas around not just CRM and sales, but even in risk and change management, things like that. So, for example, at these points here, you can see an 80% reduction in early investigation time. So if there's any sort of forensic work from an IT standpoint that would have to take place, that portion of an investigation is nearly eliminated. Also, onboarding new people is expedited as well, with a lot of the other customer experience benefits that Kate had been talking about. But as it applies more to the sales and CRM space, of course, what's important to a lot of us is how quickly we can identify at-risk relationships, actually having a noticeable impact on forecast improvement, increasing the quota achievement. That's the elusive goal that everybody has. But as Kate had also mentioned, making sales calls more effective. And you'll see how in just a minute. Let me focus a little bit more on that graph there, the Databerg. So what this illustrates here, the Databerg, is the concept of the data deluge, which the idea is that there's so much data out there that we all have at our companies. And this 54% dark data is sort of a perpetual thing where the more we learn about the data we have, the more data we realize we don't know anything about. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because you already have the data to do all of this relationship intelligence and analytics. It's already in your company someplace, whether you know you have it or whether you don't know you have it, we'll find it. But what we do with this is we surface insights, and we think of it in terms of organizational network analytics or social network analytics. So as it applies more to sales, we would focus more on the social network analytics part of it. So, when we start talking about social, a lot of people think about social 2.0 or social selling, the idea of really just kind of social media surfing to prospect. But this is really more about social 3.0, where, again, using the data that you have, surfacing not just prospects, but actual relationships and surfacing them in a meaningful way so that you can make sense of them. I want to just mention the Dunbar number. I don't know how many of you heard of the Dunbar number. Ian Robert McDonald Dunbar is an evolutionary psychologist and anthropologist, and he coined this term, the Dunbar number. And it started with recognizing in his early studies that tribes would split once they got to 150 people, community size. And so he expanded on that to show how it still applies to us today. So fast forward to present day, I mean, he had been doing research with social media companies like Facebook. And what he found is that all of our behaviors, our digital behaviors, if you will, just demonstrate our human cognitive limit in our ability to retain, manage, and leverage relationships. And, it's interesting, we talk about how he worked with Facebook and he observed the behavior. That's exactly what we're doing here, is we're observing the behavior in your digital footprint. So if we were to say that all of us on the call today, we have a company of about 1,000 employees, we could say then that we have a collective Dunbar number of 150,000 relationships. So if we were able to actually see in a tangible way, in a tactical way, those relationships so that we could use them in, across the business, but in this case in sales, and have them represented in the CRM, we might say that that might be one of our greatest assets. So this here is an illustration of a one-to-many social graph. So this isn't a vast social network, but if we were to say we had a new person start, just say they're in sales. In the first month, maybe they only have a few significant relationships, but we can see over time that, over the course of a year, they have many relationships. And you can see that there's different types of lines in here, and these are actual representations of the social graphs that we draw. And again, this is specifically to illustrate the evolution of how somebody just starting will grow their relationships. And in this particular case, we could say that if they were a very diligent salesperson, that maybe they put in the relationships on the right into their CRM. However, that's not always the case. There's sort of this challenge where sometimes our best salespeople don't believe data entry is their job, and sometimes the people that believe data entry is their job aren't the best salespeople. So when we take those relationships and we move them into the CRM, you're able to, and you'll see that in a minute here, you're able to, with far less effort, at a glance, understand exactly how those relationships are meaningful to the company. You're able to capture them, whether they're being manually answered or not. Before I go there, though, I just wanted to point this out, too. This is a way to illustrate how relationships can transition, which is important because I want to show you in this presentation, when I said that this is going to be focused in CRM in a very specific way, I want to talk about something called a transition report. So you can get the transition report through relationship intelligence and analytics, whether in the CRM or not, whether you have a CRM or not. So I'll show that to you, but part of the benefit here is that you're able to really facilitate relationship transition. So if we were to say that the person on the left and the person on the right, so the first square there, that's basically the undistilled version of the image on the right. So maybe the person on the left is leaving, and the person on the right is taking over a relationship. So in this case, we're distilling down the relationships that matter and facilitating a handover to make sure that In this case, maybe customer experience isn't negatively impacted, or maybe that revenue isn't lost. So, waiting for transition here. So this is how the transition report might look, also known as the handover report. The idea here is to make transitions to be made easy and data-driven. And this, of course, can be used outside of sales. It can be used in more of a change management or organizational development way. But what I wanted to mention here is that a problem that constantly hinders the building of exceptional customer relationships, as we all know, is attrition or is staff turnover. When our own colleagues or employees leave our organizations, customer relationships need special care and attention. And new staff need to be rapidly onboarded to be productive faster. And that kind of cuts at one of the key metrics that we're trying to address, not just in sales, but even in organizational development, which is better time to productivity. So the idea is by leveraging both organizational network analytics and social network analytics, which is more the external network, we're able to get a better handle on exactly who is going to be influential for a new person coming in internally, who they need to know to ramp up quick, and also in a sales sense, when people are interacting with the key relationships early on, instead of kind of force-gumping their way through, their new territory or what have you, those key relationships actually do far more to provide the contextual learning that they don't get in sort of an onboarding classroom type of a training type of situation. So those are just a couple of things. Obviously, as I already mentioned, it certainly helps to maintain superior customer experience. Wanted to show this really quick. This is just an example of a weekly report that people get. If you're getting the transition report, you're getting this. So the idea here is that maybe on Sunday night, everybody gets a report, shows them that they're at-risk relationships. So maybe first thing Monday morning, they can see where they have to, take action promptly, that sort of a thing. So just wanted to show this really quick, give you a sense of a canned automated report that comes out of the engine that provides this transition report. So a couple of points that Kate had made earlier. She talked about how CRM spending is at an all-time high, and it really is. It's actually the #1 market right now today. Excuse me. The #1 market today, surpassing ERP, which it's always been ERP every year before. So what's interesting about that, though, is while we're all spending more money on CRM, a separate study from the same folks said that only 6 to 7% of the info expected to go into the CRM is ever actually entered in. So it seems that ROI at times can be sort of elusive. So what's interesting is when we do what we have to do to represent the transition report into the CRM, there's actually a lot of other benefits that come out of that. Namely, a 3-fold increase in the contacts that appear in the CRM. And so with that, I'll be able to start giving you some examples with a couple of top CRM platforms. I wanted to show you some screenshots of exactly how this is represented. Sorry, I have a little cough. Let's see if I can advance here. Okay. So here's an example of a top CRM platform, and this is what the transition report looks like when it appears in the report. So one of the things that I wanted to point out is that you're not just getting the last or most recent communication, but there's this component of actually quantifying the relationship. So you can see there's a trust score column. So in this particular case, instead of giving you a number, at a glance, you're able to look at it and say, okay, it looks like the relationship with Kevin Grigsby is strong, or it's high. So the idea here is, when we have people logging into CRM, we want them to see what they need to see at a glance and be able to make a decision or be able to take action. We don't want it to be something where they have to think about what this means, what they should do next. We want them to just intuitively know what to do. So when the transition report is showing up in a CRM, you get a lot of other things that start to show up as well. So, for example, in this particular CRM, and I guess this screenshot, it just articulates a little bit more how this platform works. There's a lot of dashlets, which is a concept in the CRM where you kind of customize how you see and interact with it. In this particular screen, what we're looking at is the relationship strength. And you can see it at many different levels. Obviously, you want to see it at the contact level. And by the way, as it applies to CRM, as it applies to LinkedIn connections, to Facebook friends, those are not synonymous with relationships. So just because we get a contact into a CRM, whether we put it in manually or shows up somehow automatically, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting an accurate representation of the relationship, which ironically is kind of the point of a CRM. So it's huge to be able to have the relationship representation like this in here, and to not just have it at the contact level, but for an aggregating effect on leads, to have it on account level, to show it at the opportunity level, and ultimately to in this screen, the idea is to show the cohesiveness of the relationship, who from the company has the strongest relationship, and in a configurable context. So that's something that can be tweaked from customer to customer. So here we have some examples of how integration of this same data appears in the CRM. And on the left we have something we call links within, and on the right we have missing contacts. So this is an example, and I'll show you links within separately more, so I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But the idea here of missing contacts cuts at the idea where our salespeople are busy, the really good ones are really busy, and they might not have enough time to get all of the people into the CRM. So in this particular case, we're able to move the contacts in quickly. So if they're not in there and the CRM has recognized that Synergy's top account, for example, you're going to be prompted to move these contacts into the CRM. And again, you can see that there's a representation. I like to call it traffic light indicators. Well, the high or the strong relationship is green. Medium is white. You'll see in the other platform that medium is yellow. So just to give you a view of that. So this is, again, showing you the social graph. In this particular platform, you will have the ability to actually interact with the social graph in the platform itself. Sometimes that can be a little distracting from really focusing on what the CRM is actually supposed to do, so not everybody would choose to do this. So here this just expands a little bit more on missing contacts not in a CRM. So, but I guess what I'll say here is that with missing contacts, and obviously we know that that's an issue, considering that only 6 to 7% of the info expected to go into a CRM ever actually makes it in there. This kind of cuts at the reduction of manual data entry. But maybe even more importantly is it significantly improves data quality. So in this particular case, if a company bought a CRM and depended on this particular tool to move the contacts in, you can be sure that the data is correct because it's based off of the actual communication that happens between your company and the prospect company. So there's some other benefits that come out of that as well. Also, something interesting to point out here, going back, if you just think about that data berg that I showed you, we're looking at the digital footprint of the company. So we're observing the digital behavior, if you will, which means that it's not limited in any way to who is a licensed user in the CRM. So we're looking 360-degree view around the company. We're looking at everybody who's interacting with anybody outside of the company. So, too often customer service reps and account managers do not have the latest information or the context on what's really been going on. And this often results in unproductive calls, meetings, lost opportunities, low renewal rates, etc. So the idea is to have be up to date on what the latest interactions have been across the company. And this is real-time communication data, and we're protecting individual privacy when we do this as well. And this is something that's available contact level, lead level, account level, opportunity level, so you're able to see this sort of information at all different levels. Here we're looking at how this aggregates up to the account level to see who's communicating with a particular account. And then, of course, as we look at the relationships that we have the ability to prevent relationships from ever slipping through the cracks, run a tight ship on your accounts. So this is a transition report, again, but in a different CRM platform. And so you can see here the traffic light indicators, or what I like to call them the early warning indicators. You can see how they're much more leveraged here. So the idea is to really get at a glance to know if something's good or bad, or right or problematic, sort of a thing. So here we are looking at a couple of different things. Where on the right there we have the spiderweb graph, and what that's showing us is at a glance who has the strongest relationship to a particular contact. And then we can also see on the left there the line graph is to show us how responsive the particular contact is with our communication. So the idea here is that the red line is incoming communication while the green line is outgoing. Wait for it to change. There we go. You can also drill into the communication with contacts across all of, the entire company, from colleagues and employees. So again, this is 360-degree view. This is not based off of who is a user in Salesforce or any CRM for that matter. Also, you have the ability to aggregate to the account level again, like we saw before. Here we can see the early warning indicators for the relationship status on the lower left, responsiveness on the right. So again, this is far more at a glance. And here is another view where we're able to see at a glance more of the dispersion of contacts at different relationship levels or different degrees of relationship strength. And again, you have the account level aggregate for the responsiveness with the line graph. And the common login screen, landing, post login, are screens like this where you're looking at your top accounts. And so having the ability to actually see at a glance what's the state of the relationship and the responsiveness with those accounts, especially if you're forecasting, for example, in the status or the relationship status seems to be in the red, that might indicate that some action should be taken or a forecast should be adjusted. Some of the other things to think about here too, though, are in both of these platforms, having the ability to understand the responsiveness and the strength of the relationship means that marketing can now run campaigns segmented by the strength of the relationship and the responsiveness of the relationship. But maybe even more importantly than that is going back to the data quality, the fact that this is automated, it's coming from the actual communication flows inside the company. So this isn't somebody manually entering emails, for example. This is actual successful relationship interaction, and it's then being moved into, so it's verified contact info. So wanted to show you, going back to that links within idea that we were looking at that initial CRM platform. Links within, by the way, is a feature of the mobile app. So another way the data from the transition report can be used is in visualizing the social network, like we already saw this, but to do it on a mobile device. And as you can imagine, trying to look at something like this on a mobile device may not be as sexy and fun. So we decided to make it more sexy and fun. What we're looking at here is something that is much easier to work with, but the idea with links within is really to focus in on making sales calls and sales meetings more effective, specifically 5 times more effective by finding the path of least resistance. So when an employee wishes to find the right connection point into another company, Links Within performs a real-time search of your organization's social network, which is created and maintained by TrustSphere. And this is just another way to show the data in the transition report, again, as I had said. And so this is what we're looking at here. This shows how the strength of every relationship is measured and updated with every new interaction and enabling important decisions to be made using truly objective and empirical data. So I wanted to point out really quick that with all of the stuff that I'm showing you, message content is never analyzed. Whether it's links within or it's the transition report. In this case, the links within information that shows up here displays the 10 strongest relationships that exist between the target and your internal colleagues, but it's also sorting to show who you have the strongest relationship to. So for example, you look on the left side, those traffic light or early warning indicators represent the strength I have to that particular colleague of mine. And so the illustration on the right is just to show you that, yes, I've got the strongest relationship to Danny, but we can see that Danny and Dana both have strong relationships to Duke Energy. Scott has the weakest relationship to Duke Energy. So that's very useful in leveraging the hidden network or the dark data that we all have in our companies, and to differentiate between connections and relationships. So really, this is a really simple illustration on how this works. So on the left, you have different sources, different communication tools, if you will. So corporate-owned communication tools that are really the source of this dark data or digital footprint that you have. So we're not looking at how the company is using Facebook, for example. We're looking at corporate-owned communication. And we're analyzing, these are examples of organizational network analytics and social network analytics. But social network analytics, again, back to what tools a company owns, so whether it be IM, that sort of a thing, draws that social graph and populates relationship insights in ways where maybe it's a visualization, as I initially showed you, or it could be integration into, say, CRM, for example, like we already saw. So, again, just wanted to remind you, as I initially said, the platform spans an entire organization. So it's not limited to just sales and CRM, but you have the ability to take these relationship insights, focus exclusively internally if you want to drive organizational transformation. You can also use it from a risk standpoint, and as I showed you before, it can help with early investigation. The other thing, the part of this observing the digital behavior is that if you're benchmarking the behavior of, the ideal behavior, you of course are going to have the outliers, which creates the opportunity in verticals and industries where there's a lot of risk to identify that stuff and flag it. So with that, I appreciate you all taking the time to jump on. I will stop talking.
All right, thanks, Johnny. At this point, I would like to open up for Q&A in the last couple of minutes that we have. Again, if you'd like to pose a question, please enter it in the chat window in the corner of your screen. We do have a few that have come in. The first one, how can relationship intelligence help sales teams be more productive? Kate, maybe do you want to take that one?
Yeah, and it's basically summarizing everything that we've talked about on this webinar. In a nutshell, I think it's better prospecting with warm introductions, better targeting, better sales velocity, understanding who's been communicating with the customer to be able to have coordinated conversations, speed up deals. Johnny, you want to add anything?
Okay, we'll take that as a no.
I'm sorry, I was muted. When I said I would stop talking, I meant it. So,
nice.
So now I guess I'll talk. So you might regret this, but I guess this kind of goes back to the statistic that we were talking to about 5 times more effective sales calls. A warm introduction is just better than a cold, and I'm really identifying the path of least resistance, and that's what we were illustrating with the links within slide. So. I think those are probably a couple of the more obvious ways, but the other thing, one of the first things that we talked about too, was just in transition, whether it's a transitioning territory, new sales rep, being able to map them to key relationships, both internally and externally, right out of the gate.
Okay. There's a couple more questions. I'm hoping we can get to one or two more. What if I haven't purchased a CRM solution yet? How will this help? Johnny, you got some thoughts on that?
Sure. Since I have permission to talk, I'll just say that what's interesting here is that everybody has the same issue when they have a new tool, whether it's CRM or any other new tool, and that is adoption, because we're dealing with change. So in this particular case, there are a lot of companies that the primary reason they're looking at a tool like this is specifically to drive adoption with their CRM. So if you're looking at buying a CRM and you're thinking already about how am I going to get my people to adopt this, this is kind of a can of worms, so I'm going to focus more on just the CRM itself. But if you've got an issue with just trying to get people to log in to CRM, if they know that they're going to be able to understand the relationships that they have or relationships that they can leverage from across the company, but they are going to get that from logging into the CRM, they're going to log in. Also, you have the issue of no longer being limited to just 6 to 7% of the data inside of the CRM that you expect to be in there, as we saw in that earlier study. So I think those are a couple of big things, but even if you don't have the CRM yet and you wanted to be able to get things like links within or that transition report and be able to use tools like that, it's a very inexpensive tool to activate, and you have access to that. And this engine is collecting all of this relationship data so that when you actually flip on your CRM, when you buy it and turn it on and you integrate this, it's going to move all of that rich relationship context and contacts into the CRM. So you're going to have a head start on all your peers, other companies using CRM that haven't been taking the same approach.
Yeah, and it's not only contacts, but it's also the value of these contacts that a CRM doesn't give you. So I really think that relationship intelligence gives you a lot more power than just core information that you have in the CRM.
Perfect. Okay. I see that we're right up on the hour. I'd like to thank everyone for spending some time with us today. We hope you're introduced to some useful CRM perspectives and capabilities and what they can do for your sales organizations. Please visit trustsphere.com to learn more or request a more specific conversation and/or a demo. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we look forward to future dialogue around reimagining the CRM with relationship intelligence.